The Wings Over New Zealand show is brought to you in association with the Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum, New Zealand's #1 aviation discussion forum online. There you'll find discussion on all aspects of New Zealand aviation, from history to current affairs, and thousands of photos covering the Royal New Zealand Air Force, airlines, general aviation, warbird restorations, airshow news, sport aviation, home building, gliding, aviation media, and much, much more. You'll be in good company with other aviation enthusiasts, including pilots, engineers, warbird owners and restorers, historians and authors, modelers, aviation photographers, and many others. Sign up to the Wings Over New Zealand community now. It's free and easy. Just Google Wings Over New Zealand and you'll find the forum.
Hi everybody, Andrew Gormley, CEO of Classic Flyers here. If you're interested in classic aviation and you want to get up close and personal to old aircraft and see some of New Zealand's aviation history, come across the Classic Flyers, Jean Batten Drive, Mount Maunganui, right on the edge of the airport. You can go for flights in old aeroplanes like Boeing Stearmans and Harvards. There's lots to see. Kids' parties happening here all the time. We have functions and function rooms, business meetings, and a great cafe with excellent coffee. If you'd like to be involved with Classic Flyers, we also have the volunteer groups who do all things from helping out with function work or just on the main hangar floor with visitors and guests or birthday parties, right through to engineers who get involved in restoring some of our wonderful old aircraft assets. These things are all part of New Zealand's aviation history. It's a great place and it's in a good location. Come and have a visit. Check out the website on www.classicflyersnz.com.
Hi, Melanie here from Aviation Tours, unique itineraries for aviation enthusiasts, taking you to some of the most amazing air shows and events in the UK and Australia. They're leisurely, comfortable, fun, escorted, and to all the places you've been wanting to visit. If independent travel's out of your comfort zone, or you just prefer the good company of fellow enthusiasts on a tour taking in the best aviation, motoring and military museums, take a look at our website aviationtoursnz.com for more info and join us on the trip of a lifetime. Or call me for a chat on 021 076 8308.
Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.
So I'll hand over to our next speaker, Bob McGarry, who's had a lifetime of working with old aircraft. Bob is one of the co-founders of the Tiger Moth Club of New Zealand, and he is also the chap who restored the is it Simmonds or Simmonds? Simmonds Spartan 3-seater back to flying condition. Bob.
Thank you very much. Good looking group, eh? Bit of grey hair around, or in a lot of cases, not much hair. Rightio. Just a little bit about myself. I came into the Air Force in 1956 and got out again in 1964. Unfortunately, I didn't get the trade I wanted, and which of course was airframes, but I ended up a signaller. So the only really good thing about that was I learnt to type. So that was really good going. So whilst I was, we got out of the Air Force in 1964 at Whenuapai, and I'd met a young lady from there and I got married. And a friend whom we'd met with through Arch Finch. I don't know, anybody heard of Arch Finch? He had an engineering company at Rotorua doing aircraft engineering, and Arch spent a lot of time in my life. When I was about 14, I had an uncle in Masterton who was flying with air contracts with Tiger Moths, and I used to go and stay with him in the school holidays, and I would go down to the hangar and muck around down there with an Arch, showed me how to gas weld, He's taught me electric welding and doing fabric work, recovering aircraft, doing fabric repairs and that sort of stuff, and preparing tiger moths which were bought from the Government Stores Board, converting them by putting a hopper in the front and all that sort of stuff, you know. So when I thought about, got to 16, and the Air Force were accepting boy entrants in those days, and I said to Arch, you know, do you reckon I ought to join the Air Force or perhaps get a job with someone like you? And he said, well, there's no job with someone like me at the moment. So he said, I reckon you ought to join the Air Force. They'll give you some really good training in airframes and stuff. So I became a boy entrant, and they said, no, your education's no good for that. You can become an MT driver or an MT mechanic, or you can go into signals. So I thought, oh well, I'll go into signals. So the good thing about that was I learned to type. And I think that's probably, of anything that I have learned in my lifetime, learning to touch type, not having to watch the keys, is just such a bonus. It really has been. So, so even today, no problem. I just get on the keyboard, away she goes. Good stuff. Right, I said I was going to, I used to spend some time at Air Contracts in Masterton. Those are in the days of the Tiger Moths, and then came the first Cessna 180, which didn't go down all that well. I was there on the day that the pilot decided that it had been about a 35-degree day, and he thought he'd nip off down to Castle Point and go for a swim. So he's landing on the sand there at Castle Point and ran into a soft bit, and the aircraft ended upside down. So at about 1 o'clock, we'd all just come back, and Arch got me doing some revisions of some of the publications. And I'm in the office there, and the phone goes, Arch picks it up, and then he started to go red. And I thought he was going to burst. And then at the end, he burst out, "You what?" And of course, you know, things followed from there, including his pedigree. So anyway, Arch was so cheesed off, he grabbed a hammer, and he walked out into the car park, and he threw it through the windscreen of the pilot's car. So you can see the reason that happened was a couple of days before, the loader driver had run into the wingtip of the Cessna 180 and damaged it quite badly. And we'd gone out to the strip, and Arch took his panel saw with him, and we sawed off about a foot of the wing, and that enabled the aircraft to be returned to base. So there was a Cessna 180 private one sitting in the hangar that was having some maintenance done, so he rings up the owner and says, "Can I borrow your wing?" Well, of course, he borrowed the wing, that's okay. Then we spent the night getting it all up, and about midnight or so, we all head home. And of course, this pilot goes and upends the airplane the next day. He was sort of in a bit of a mess. So that's one of the small things that happened. But anyway, I learned a lot of stuff there. Went into the Air Force thinking that I was going to become an airframes or engines man. Went into signals. So I got out of the Air Force in 1964 and went to work for Arch in Rotorua, as he was based in those days. And he said, "You've got 2 years. You're on a 2-year contract. You must have your licence within those 2 years." So I got stuck in, and I became a licensed aircraft engineer. In fact, somewhere here, there's the licence I got. 9th of January 1973. I became a licensed engineer. Bob, he says, Field Air are looking for an engineer in their engine shop. I think perhaps you ought to go down there. He said, I've made an appointment for you to have an interview with them tomorrow morning. So he said, you better get your skates on and get down there. So we went down there, my wife and I got the job, came back to Rotorua, and Art said, now, there's a mate of mine owns a house in Fielding. The people have just vacated, so I've booked the house for you. So I said, well, crikey, Arch, I actually quite enjoy working here. He said, yeah, but I want to put another guy through like I put you through. And actually, he put about 12 of us into the system, 12 engineers. I think that was a pretty good record myself. Today, we need the same thing. There's a distinct lack of licensed aircraft engineers. Rightio, I ended up at Field Air in Palmerston North, working in their engine shop. One night I got a call from a guy down here in Christchurch. He was actually the chief engineer of Airwork. And he said, Bob, I'm looking for somebody to run our engine shop. You interested? I said, oh, no, things are going all right here and what have you. And he said, well, what's your salary? So I told him what my salary was. He said, if we doubled it, would you be interested? Well, of course, just about burnt the soles off of the chutes getting down here. And included, they paid for shifting all my gear, actually rented a house for me down here. And of course, you know, what do they say? The rest is history. So we, whilst I was here with Airwork, that all went pretty good. We went from a staff of 7 to 29 over a period of about 5 years, and we were turning out a Lycoming engine a week there, which was quite a good operation. Anyway, one thing or two led to the other, and I decided I would set up business with Alan Mincher, which some of you may know, and he and I set up a business at West Melton airfield. So we went on from there. I ended up with 69 aircraft that I was looking after on an annual basis, and then during that time I was thinking, you know, one day I'm going to have to retire. I thought, you know, if I could come up with something interesting to that I could build and possibly sell, that might sort of be a bit of superannuation. Because being in private business, you forget all about that you're going to actually retire. So I went and saw Sid Lister down at down south. Excuse me, I'll have the odd senior moment. Anyway, went and saw Sid and I said, can I borrow your old Spartan to make up a set of drawings so I can build a replica? Oh, he says, I can do better than that, Bob. He said, how about you get the wreckage of ABK? Now, ABK, pre-war, this was taken around about that time. Another one over. Do you remember Sid Lister? Any of you remember that old fella? No, that's all right. Now, here's ABK being flown in by Cyril, what the hell was his name? Anyway, he owned the aircraft and he lived in the upper hut, and he flew the aircraft to Sid because Sid already had a Spartan, ABZ. And he said to Sid, you look after this during the war, and when I come back, I'll pick it up. And Sid said, well, look, I'd better buy it off you in case somebody goes and kills you or something. So he said, oh, well, £5. So they handed over the £5, and that was that. So he went off to war. He didn't actually come back. But anyway, there was an engineer working at Airwork in Christchurch, a guy by the name of, oh cripes. Anyway, he wanted to join the Air Force as a pilot. So he said, look, how about, he got on to Sid. He said, look, you know, any chance of getting a bit of duel in one of those Spartans you've got? And Sid said, yeah, I can tee that up. So he teed up a guy in Timaru who had been an instructor pre-war. And so this guy goes down, Charlie anyway. So he came down and they started teaching him to fly, to give him some pointers so that when the Air Force came along, they might select him as a pilot, not an engineer. So he did a few circuits and what have you, and mucking around for half a day or so, and then they decided he should go solo. So anyway, Charlie had a bit of problem finding the ground. And after several approaches, it ended up like this. So the parts were taken away or were to be taken away, but in between times, Charlie had a broken arm, a broken leg, and most of his teeth missing. So they thought, hell, you know, we're going to have to get the ambulance in. So it was all right to ring up for the ambulance to come and get him. And then they said, well, what, the constabulary may get involved in this. We better sort something out there. So they wandered over to Charlie's motorbike that he'd ridden down from Christchurch on. And, well, you got an axe, Sid? And yeah, okay. So they thought they'd better beat the bike up to show that it had a terrible accident, and this guy was having to be carted off to hospital. So anyway, the constable duly arrived, about 2 feet behind the ambulance, and little did he know that between the wool shed that was in front of him and was this aeroplane in that condition. So they didn't let on about that, of course, because at that time civil flying was banned. You weren't allowed to fly. So they'd been flying this thing totally illegally, really. So that's okay. The aircraft eventually was loaded up and or pulled apart, and it was put into the wool shed up in the rafters. Now, I went to see Sid about borrowing his ABZ to do some drawings so that I could do a duplicate. Oh, she said, no problem there. He said, you can have ABK. She's down in the shed there. So we wandered down and had a look. And he said, there you are, up in the roof there, that's ABK. And that's what I got. Cost me $1. So that was okay. And a signed piece of paper. No mucking around with estates and things if something went wrong. So we got stuck in, and about that time I was at the museum here, and they had a guy who used to show people around called Clive Henderson. Now Clive and I were having a yarn at one stage there, and he said he was a draftsman. And he said, you know, Bob, I'd love to do a set of drawings for an aeroplane. And I said, Clive, man, have I got a job for you. And I wrapped my arm around him and said, look, you know. So anyway, he got cracking, and 270 pages later of drawings, he had a drawing for every one of those parts on there. So that was that. Of course, we didn't get very much of ABK, of that sort of stuff. But Sid said, well, take ABZ up to Christchurch, and he said, you can take bits, or do whatever you need to do to make your drawings. So Clive and I got cracking, and we ended up with all these drawings, and that's where the parts were all made from those. Those parts were all 4130 steel. The original parts, of course, were mild steel, because that was the way it was done in those days. That's the sort of drawing he did. Very detailed, and we decided that we'd do the whole thing using millimetres instead of inches. So she became a metric machine.
What was the reasoning behind that?
It's a lot easier to measure long distances in millimetres than it is in inches, and then try and scratch it around, and 17 3/8 or 17 7/16 or something is a pain in the butt. And when you talk about 2031 millimetres, bang, it's right there, isn't it? So away we went. Next one. Now, you probably know that the de Havilland DH60 Gypsy Moth, it's its anniversary. Is it today or tomorrow?
It was the 22nd, so yesterday, but it's still the 22nd. Well, it's just turned the 23rd in Britain, so yeah, it was yesterday. It was the 100th anniversary of its first flight.
So that's the 100th. Now, a Gypsy Moth is a wooden aeroplane, right? It's got a wooden fuselage, what have you, and that up there is exactly the same as the Gypsy Moth. It was built exactly the same way, plywood glued to these stringers and things. There was a longeron went along the top and one along the bottom. How much more have I got of that? Well, there's the tail end. That's the same sort of thing. Now this Simmonds aircraft was unusual in that he tried to design it so that you had to have a minimum of components to actually assemble the aeroplane. For instance, on the end of there you'll see there's a fin. That's actually the tailplane. It's got a fin on either end and a centre section piece just through here. I'm a bit shaky, aren't I? So the elevator is the same as the rudder. So you've got, and that goes along, the undercarriage legs, left hand and right hand are identical. The flying wires are all the same length. It's the wires that go between the wings to stop it falling to bits. And that went on right through the aeroplane. So, and this object, of course, was if you were operating this aircraft, you only had to have a minimum of spares to actually have in your stores. So that was okay. Now, Oliver Simmonds, at the time he designed this aircraft, was working for Supermarine, and he was specialised in wings and airfoils. Now, he had been operating there with the operation of the last of the Schneider Cup machines, and you may remember that the last Schneider Cup machine had a wing quite closely following the Spitfire. So the man, Oliver Simmonds, who designed this, had a big lot to do with designing the wing of the Spitfire. Anyway, when Supermarine, Mr. Mitchell, heard about that Oliver had built this aeroplane, designed and built it, and was about to fly it, he said, well, that's ours. He said, you work for us, and you know, anything you do out of ours is still ours. You're under contract to us 24/7. So anyway, they had a few interesting conversations which resulted in Oliver Simmonds being fired. So he carried on, set up his own company, and the rest is history, as they say. That was in about 1927, I think, 26, 27. So he got stuck in with this aeroplane, and as you can see, the commonality of parts to cut down the actual parts in inventory was what was the selling point for the aeroplane. All the wings are exactly the same. So when you think about that, the curvature on the top of the wing and the beneath the wing is the same. It's called a symmetrical airfoil, right? So you can have it either way up. Now, it's interesting that at one time out at West Melton, I had 3 pit specials that I was maintaining from down Ashburton way. Now, these aircraft, being aerobatic, have a symmetrical wing, which is why they can fly upside down without any hassles, you know. So I thought to myself, well, you know, that's I worked out, actually, going back a step, I worked out that the lower wing, or one of the wings off the Spartan, was actually the same airfoil as the lower wing of the Pit Special. Now, at the very beginning of the time when I started to rebuild ABK, a guy came into me one day and he said, look, Bob, I want to have a talk to you about rebuilding this aeroplane. I said, oh yeah, where you go? And he said, well look, I think it's a dangerous aircraft. I don't think you should rebuild it because somebody's going to get hurt. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, they've all crashed, a whole lot of them. All of them have been in New Zealand. I said, yeah, but a lot of de Havilland aircraft did that as well. And he said, well, you know, he said, Bob, I would fully recommend that you don't carry on with the rebuild. So anyway, that had me a bit worried. So Clive Henderson said, well, I tell you what we'll do. I'll quickly do up a set of drawings for a model. So, and I've got a guy who would possibly build us a model. So this guy built a 4-foot wingspan of the Spartan with the symmetrical airfoil. And he did some stalling tests with it. And it didn't spiral out of control. It was quite reasonably okay. So I thought in my wisdom that I would change the airfoil of the top wing of the Spartan and make it the same as the Pit Special. So that was okay. So that meant the top wings could be interchanged and the bottom wings could be interchanged. But, you know, so we got the thing up and flying. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Well, there's the sort of construction of the fuselage. You can see it's plywood down the sides, 4 longerons. You know, they're the runners that go the full length, and varied bits that hold it all together. There it is, another view from the front. This bit here, that's the stub wing, that's the carry-through structure for the front spar of the lower wing. I think there's actually another one here. There we are putting the turtle deck on the top. Another one, you see the cockpit doors. She has swing open doors, hinged doors, rather than the doors like on a tiger moth, which are a fold down sort of effort. And then I got all worried about the stressing of the thing. I thought, hell, if this thing, I really should get it stressed. So I came upon a guy by the name of Phil Hinden, and he was a bit of a whiz kid, and so he did this setup here at the stressed the fuselage, and we found that it was all going to be strong enough to do the job. It was just covering my bum, really, more than anything. Then we got to fabricing. Where am I up to? The construction of the aircraft was carried out. Took me quite a few hours to make all those bits and pieces, and we got the whole thing going together. And here I'm putting the fabric covering on. Has anybody got any questions so far? Well, thank goodness for that. Okay, so we're doing the fabricing, right? So we went out to Wigram here, to the museum, and the guys there machined the fabric into panels which were large enough to cover a whole wing. It's a wee job they did for me. So there we are, and there it is. It's tautened up. It's Seconite fabric, and that fabric is heat tightened. So you start off with about 180 degrees on the iron that you're running over it, and it shrinks a little bit. You up the temperature a little bit, and it shrinks a bit more. So you keep on going until such as you get the right amount of tension on it. In other words, a 10-cent coin should bounce about 3 inches off the fabric, and you drop it from about a foot high. Which is a good way of working out the thing. What you've got to watch out with the stuff is that you can over-tighten it and distort the airframe. And I remember condemning a set of wings off a Tiger Moth, which it got so tight that the back of the trailing edge was scalloped between each rib. So he had to take the covering off and start again. Wasn't a happy boy, I can tell you. In fact, I think my pedigree went down about 20 inches. And here we were just doing the masking of the painting, ZK-ABK. A little bit further. Now, you will have noticed there that the aircraft is actually built in 2 bits, the fuselage. It has a joint right behind the rear cockpit. On to the next one. So this is the way I set the aircraft up to put the wings on it and sort out all the rigging and what have you of it as far as it could go at that point in time. So everything fitted. It was quite surprising, really. And there we are. She's on her wheels, and the rear fuselage is about to be joined up to the, or joined together. That's the controls of the machine. The controls are really only in the rear cockpit, because remember it's a 3-seater. You had 2 seats in the front for the passengers and the driver at the back. So those are the footwells or the pads on the floor for the front or for the rudder bar at the back. And you'll notice that whilst it's got the pads at the front, there's no rudder and no control. In actual fact, I altered that bar there a little bit, and you can actually plug in a control column at the front. Naughty, eh? So there we are. Now, if you want to ask any questions, just yell out, won't you? Now, it has full instrumentation. As you can see, we actually do know what revs the engine's doing here. We actually have the airspeed, and we've got the altitude, and we know what the oil pressure is. And we've got a couple of switches there which tell us whether the engine's running or not. So there we are. You can see the wings are on and they're folded. And there we are fitting the engine to it. Now at this point in time, we were worried, or I was worried about the CFG of the aircraft. Now fortunately, Civil Aviation got to hear about this aeroplane and they dived into their archives. I'll actually have here the document, which is the airworthiness certificate for ZK-ABK, and it's dated, it's in 29 anyway, early 30 I think. I can't see it in this light. My eye's not that good. Anyway, she was actually erected here at Wigram in 1929. So there you are, that's the thing with the wings folded. It gives you an idea of just what the whole thing looks like. And I'm fitting the engine into the front there. And we're getting better at it. You'll notice the scales under the wheels there. And of course, later on, there we are there.
What's the engine, Bob?
The engine, original engine was a thing called a Hermes, about 100 horsepower, 90 horsepower or so, 4-cylinder, upright, cylinder heads at the top. And I, of course, in my time overhauled over 50 Tiger Moth engines, and so I decided I would upend a Tiger Moth engine and convert it so it could be used to run in the Spartan. That involved making, I don't know whether I can, anyway, I had to convert it to a wet sump, which it had been originally because it was a Gypsy 2 initially. The Gypsy 1 engine was an upright with a wet sump. The Gypsy 2 was the same engine with a slightly larger bore, so consequently a little bit more horsepower. The Gypsy 3 was an inverted engine, which was in the first of the de Havilland aircraft like the Puss Moth and those sort of airframes about that time. So there we are. So we're weighing the thing up here, and I was moving the engine backwards and forwards to get the CFG in the right place. So we eventually ended up with the right point, and that's when I drilled the holes through the wooden longerons, which were the actual engine mounting. So we got the CFG in the right place. And looking at it from the back, you can see how close the wings are at the top there and what have you. And it gives you a good idea. If you're looking here, you can see the centre section of the tailplane and the fin there, and the rudder being the same as the elevators. Quite a great idea, really, wasn't it? So then we pranced off to giving the engine a run, and it actually ran quite well, other than it ran very rich. Now you see, when you have the carburetor on a Tiger Moth engine, or with the inverted engine, there's an updraft carb. So I couldn't use an updraft carb, rather a downdraft carburetor. I couldn't use the updraft carb on here. So I had to get a carburetor off a 150 horsepower Lycoming. Canterbury Aero Club kindly donated that to me. And so I modified it to go onto this motor here, and we were able to get the whole thing running and doing its trick. That's how we got it from where I put it together, which was in Wise Street in Addington, in my friend's workshop, and we took it out to Wigram. It was significant in a way that she was originally assembled in New Zealand at Wigram, and here we were taking it out there, and I felt quite nostalgic about all that. It was quite interesting. Now this guy here is John Goddard. Can you remember him? John elected to do the test flying, and his wife said it was okay because his insurance was paid up. So that's John sitting there, and away we go. So here we are on the first taxiing test. Now you'll notice all the rubbish on the tail skid. They're just mowing the grass out there, and anyway, taxiing across the grass, that had all sort of got attached. So anyway, John said, well, it seems to go okay. He said, it sort of feels all right. He said, I think tomorrow we'll have a lash and see if we can actually fly it. And so he did. And there it is. Now the significant thing there is, and the thing that I was worried about, was the streamlining of the elevators to the tailplane. I was hoping like hell that I had set up the correct incidence on the tailplane so that it would streamline in flight. And here we are as a graphic demonstration there of the streamlining. One to me. Now, it's interesting also, you'll notice that the rudder is quite deep. Now, this guy who saw me right at the beginning of the project, he said, you know, these things spin out of control when they get out into a spin. So I decided that I would lengthen the rudder so that we had a little bit more rudder control, just in case. So anyway, that was all right. John went up and did a bit of cruising around that day, and we had one or two issues. It was flying left wing low, so I had to re-rig it slightly, but that was done overnight, and everything sort of went along okay. Now, an interesting thing about the aircraft, all biplanes spin, don't they? Right? You agree? All biplanes will spin. Now, you've got to think about that machine there with a deeper aerofoil on the top wing to the lower wing, like the Pitt Special. Anyway, John came down from one of the test flights. He said, Bob, it will not spin. I said, what? He said, it won't spin. I said, well, you're not doing it right. And he said, well, I've tried every way. He said, it'll do a 1.5 turn, sort of a roll, and then it spiral dives. And he said, of course, when it spiral dives, he said, it just comes out of that just so easily. And I said, well, I don't think you're trying hard enough. So he said, oh, well. So we gave it some more fuel and sent him up again. And anyway, he out over Horsell, just south of Horsell, I had my binoculars and I'm watching him. John climbs up, goes, see him stall it down, and you see it goes around a little bit, and then it just goes, and I thought, gee whiskers, he's blooming right. So he comes back and he said, well, Bob, I'm sorry, mate, but it will not bloody spin. You've just got to believe me. And then I thought to myself, well, it's a bit of a breakthrough, isn't it? You know, this aeroplane which was spinning out of the sky and killing itself and people now doesn't spin. So I thought that was really quite something. So there we are. That's the throttle control quadrant I made for it. You notice it's got a mixture control because of the Marvel Schaebler carburetor off the Lycoming engine, which has a mixture control, of course. It's the ELT up on the top there, the switches for it. Now this is the sump that I had to make to go on the bottom of the engine to make it into a wet sump. But it worked a dream. There's the carburetor. I had to alter the carburetor by putting a tickler in it. You know what a tickler is? It's not something you do to your wife. Well, I hope. Well, okay, we won't go there. Where's the thing? That's a tickler. What it does is it pushes on the top of the float here and stops the float rising up and closing off the fuel flow. So when you want to flood the engine for starting, you just push that button down and the fuel flows in to whatever point you want. Now on this engine, to start the thing, you know, with a tiger moth, I don't know, if many of you had much to do with tiger moths, or I think there's one or two you around. Okay, you tickle the thing, and there's a drain on the inlet manifold, and when the fuel starts to run out of there, it's got enough. So then you pull it forward 4 turns with the throttle closed, and then use your set the throttle and give her a swing, and she'll go every time. Well, most times. Well, unless it's hot. If it's hot, it'll never start. So there you are. It's just a quick little thing. Guy flies in with an Oster at Rotorua, lands the thing there, pulls up to just parked it by the control tower there, jumps out. A guy races off, another one comes along, jumps on board, and they go to start it. And he spends about an hour swinging this engine, and he couldn't get the damn thing to start. It's a gypsy, you know, when they're cold they want to go. When they're hot they say, bugger there, I've been there, don't want to do that. So they are very difficult to start when they're hot, if you don't know how to do it. So Arch says to me, Bob, he said, turn that engine, go over and give those guys a hand to start, will you? So I wandered off over there and I said, oh, would you like a hand to start it? And the guy, who's sort of like this, and he said, could you please? And he said, do you think you can make it go? I said, yep. So I started turning it backwards. And I flicked it back, and he said, it's not that way. You go the other way, he says. And I said, oh, well, it's for the moment, it's this way. So I flicked her over and flicked her over. I did about 40 blades, right? So I said, rightio, set in contact, first swing, away she goes. And if you ever over prime a gypsy engine, you've got to get rid of that fuel. It has to be got out of the combustion chamber, spin it backwards. It works, I can tell you. Rightio, so where are we up to here? We're about to run out of time, are we? That's the top of the engine. You can see there the Gypsy Major, there's the original bottom piece of the oil box, which is on a Tiger Moth. So I made that there to keep the oil in what did get down that way. Around here is a scupper on the top of the retaining cap for the valve spring. You fill that with oil each time you go to start it. Now that runs down the gap in the keys which hold the locking device and lubricate the valve guide. And you must have bronze valve guides, right? So, and the grease nipple in the middle, up there, come on. That's the grease nipple. Do that once a day. And away she goes. So we did about 32 hours with the aircraft before it was, I sold it. And the machine is now in the Ashburton Aviation Museum, which a little plug for them. You should visit. If you haven't visited, shame on you. Right, so there we are. that's about the end of the Spartan. So flight-wise, the rudder is too big. The rudder that I put on it, it's over-ruddered. So if I'd made a rudder exactly the same size as the elevators, I'm sure it would have come out a lot better. John Goddard said you've only got to think about pushing on the rudder bar and the damn thing sets off that way. It's really quite tiring to fly from that point of view. It cruises at about, full power is about 106 miles an hour, and it cruises at around about 80, 82, 83 at 1900 RPM, which is the normal sort of cruise speed for a gypsy engine. What else? Any questions? Come on, I can't hear you. I know I'm half deaf, but you know. No?
Did you ever figure out why it didn't spin?
No. No, I ran out of time. No, we couldn't find that out, but the having played with these pit specials that I was playing with, or I shouldn't say playing with, I was servicing at West Melton there. As you know, the pits is a really live little machine, and the stall with those is very distinctive. When they stall, they really stall. But the idea that they have with the pits is that the bottom wing stalls first before the top wing. Now that gives the aeroplane, it holds it in a set position as it goes into the stall. It doesn't roll off like a Tiger does, you know? Those of you that have flown a Tiger will know that as soon as you stall it, the thing wants to race off that way or that way, normally to the left. So, so there we are. That's about the only thing we can offer about it, is that it stalls beautifully. And if it does, it won't spin on its own. If you stall it with your feet off the rudder bar, it just nods its head, goes down far enough to get the airspeed going again and the airflow over the wing, and you're flying again. So that's is there something wrong with it? You know, you sort of think, well, hang it on, it's a biplane. All biplanes spin, a whole damn lot of them. If I come up with something really, but I'm a bit late. Not many biplanes in production these days. So I didn't go for a patent. I thought that would be a waste of time. So there we are. So there you are, guys. That's the Spartan.
Just a question, just before you finish. On your fuselage, how thick is that plywood that you've got attached to the trusses? I presume it's like a truss frame.
Yes, the plywood just is one long sheet. It's just spliced together on a 15-to-1 splice. And the sides of the fuselage, from the rear fuselage, is 1/16, and the turtle deck is 1/16, and same underneath. The front fuselage is 1/8 plywood, and it's 5-ply. Very stiff material. It's finished ply. There is a spec for it. Is it F35 or something? And that's it. The cement or the bonding I used to stick it all together was West System epoxy, right? Now every time we made a joint using the cement, I used an off-cut of material which I would break it and cement it together and put the date on it and what have you. I still have all of those. The object being, of course, that over the years we can actually break one to make sure that the glue joint, the glue bond, is still serviceable. As you probably are aware, they used to use a resorcinal glue in UK. It wasn't resorcinal, what was it called? The one before that. And, sorry? Redux. No, it was just a name of the system more than anything. And like things like the, oh God. Anyway, those plywood and that sort of thing getting moist, this glue was deteriorating. And really, in a lot of ways, that's what killed the mosquito, because the type of glues they were using weren't waterproof, and that relied on the fabric and the doping on the outside of the airframe to keep it all dry internally. So there you go. And that's one of the reasons you don't see a whole heap of mosquitoes flying around. So there you go. Any other questions?
What was on the outside of the plywood?
Outside of the plywood was Seconite fabric, doped on, and that was there purely to seal the wood, so that try and keep the moisture content, which should be around about 14-15%, and away you go. More questions? Come on. No? God, I didn't know you guys. Hang on, I got one more thing. See this? That's the seat belt that was in the aircraft when I got it, when I bought it. Right? Pass it around and have a look at it.
It's not Air New Zealand standard.
Just look at how the latch is. The latch is the same as a seat belt in a Curtiss P40. That was 1929. The P40 was 3940, somewhere there. Brilliant, eh? But look at how it's attached to the airframe. Look at the ends of it. Rightio, I'm out of here.
Thank you very much, Bob. That was brilliant.
That was the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.